dark of the night, whispers of deceit.
Shadows dance on the walls.
Secrets they repeat. A shadowed figure
with eyes full of lies.
hiding truths in the shadows where no one dares to pry. Uncover the truth, let the lies come undone. Peel back the layers until the light is shown. Uncover the truth, let the shadows run. Break free from the chains and find the sun. Uncover the truth in the dead of the night, where secrets lie hidden like a whispered bite. Uncover the truth in the dim of the light, where betrayals take root in the heart of the fight. In the rain-soaked streets, under the moon's pale light, a crime unfolds with a twist.
Crime unfolds, Steve.
Yes, and a crime has unfolded. We are going back in time during our historical period the last few weeks and looking at the legendary, the original outlaw himself, Jesse James. And it was interesting reading about him because I did not know a ton about him. I read more. I mean, I knew more about Wyatt Earp and his crew, John Dillinger.
John Dillinger, bank robber also, yep.
Yes, but not Jesse James. And it was very eye-opening to learn his experience from growing up to getting into a gang to his longevity. Usually they don't have longevity as successful outlaws from the years he was active. And it's just amazing at how young he died. He died at 34 years old. And this is a guy who fought in the Civil War as well. So it's crazy. It was a crazy time in history when all this was going down. And you know, he was born in the 1800s, 1847. So this was at the height of tensions in America between the North and the South. And they lived in Missouri, and Missouri was mostly it was newer, and it was settled from people basically from the upper South, like Kentucky, right. Tennessee. It became known as Little Dixie. He lived in Clay County, Missouri. The other thing that was also that stood out was slaves were not as prevalent in Missouri altogether, but the Clay County owned 25% of the slaves in Missouri. So that was different. And he had a very, very large family. His original father grew hemp, was a farmer, died, and then his mother remarried twice. She remarried twice. The second husband was a doctor, Dr. Reuben Samuel, and then they had another 4 children together. So they had 6 kids and 7 slaves, and they survived basically cultivating tobacco. So once I mean, I never knew the American Civil War was as brutal, I guess, is from what I've read here. And once it started, the Confederates really showed no mercy and murdered civilians. They executed prisoners. They scalped the dead, and they sometimes dismembered them. The Union enforced martial law, which allowed you to raid on homes, arrest civilians, and legal executions. So it really got out of hand fast, and the James brothers got into it. They sided with the Confederates. Frank James and Jesse James joined. They were called guerrilla squads back then, and a Union militia. And that's when they really discovered their love for the South. And Frank James was wounded by a shotgun blast that took off his arm. He lost his right arm to a shotgun blast, and Jesse James took a shotgun blast to the chest that they thought was going to be mortal, and he ended up going back to a Union soldier's home and survived. So after the Civil War, this is when basically Missouri was deeply divided. The conflict split the population into three bitterly opposed factions. The anti-slavery Unionists, they were with the Republican Party. The segregationists, the conservative Unionists, identified with the Democratic Party, and the pro-slave people were also Democrats, and they were part of the states. And this is when Reconstruction legislation began, and a new state constitution freed all Missouri slaves. But not only that, if you were a former Confederate, you were not allowed to vote. You were not allowed to serve on juries. You were not allowed to work in government, corporate offices, or preach at church. So the atmosphere was even volatile after the Civil War, and this is what caused the prevalence of gangs to begin. Armed gangs of veterans from both sides of the war, because they were limited in ways that they could make a living. So James and Frank took part, allegedly, it's not confirmed, but their first robbery was at their own bank, the Clay County Bank, I believe it was called. And it became a legendary crime because one of the bank members was shot and killed. Jesse James claimed his innocence from the start because he said he was still bedridden from his wound and could not have participated. No evidence has been found that connects them, but there isn't any that conclusively ruled them out. So the gang that the James brothers were in shortly after that, they freed two members of Quantrill's gang, which was one they were part of, and the jailer in the effort. And that was massive, massive news. The local violence in the state, like I never would have expected Missouri to have massive, massive violence, lawlessness. And this is what happened right after the war. The governor had to order the militia into several counties in Missouri to suppress the outlaw guerrilla activity. And, the Republicans were occupying Lexington, and on election day, shortly afterward, the state militia shot Governor Thomas Clement dead. And Jesse James wrote about this with bitterness. And again, which I think contribute to him continuing his spree.
Right.
So, the survivors of, quote, now Clement's gang continued bank robberies during the next 2 years. Though their numbers dwindled because people got arrests, there were gunfights, there were lynchings, and they later tried to justify robbing the banks. They targeted really the small local banks, based on local capital. And the robberies only hurt the locals that they claimed to support. And there was always a myth that they robbed from the rich and gave to the poor, like Robin Hood.
Well, that was part of the whole. That was part of the whole thing. Like they were like guerrilla war. They thought of themselves like guerrilla warfare guys because of his older brother Frank James was part of that like Confederate
Right.
bushwhacker crew. And then after the Civil War, they created that gang and started robbing banks and stagecoaches and trains and
Yes.
anything that targeted or represented the Union or Northern elites or the railroads, and it all happened within like a pretty short time period,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
years, but it was years, but they
But it started, like you said, it was like really from 1866 through 1869, they were most active, and
right.
that's when they were really bringing it, and they had a powerful gang.
Right.
And they were part of several different gangs that had changed over time. It was kind of before and after the Civil War. But like, again, like you think of Missouri, you would never think that there would be this kind of local violence that emerged. And so the James brothers ended up joining up with Cole Younger and his brothers.
Right, the Younger, yep.
There were 4 of them, and other former Confederates, and they were known as the James Younger gang. And
Right.
with Jesse James, the most public face of the gang, he obviously shared some leadership, but he made all the final calls. The gang now moved the string of robberies starting from Iowa and going down to Texas, and then from Kansas to West Virginia. And like you said, banks, stagecoaches, they robbed a fair in Kansas City, and they carried out their crimes in front of crowds. And they even put on a show for bystanders. July 21st, 1873, they had a train robbery derailing a Rock Island line train west, heading to Iowa, and they stole $3,000, which is equivalent to 79 grand today. They wore KKK masks.
Did they really? Okay, I didn't even know that.
Yes. And by this time, the Klan had been suppressed in the South by President Grant's use of the Enforcement Acts. And former rebels attacked the railroads as a symbol of threatening centralization, because they still wanted the goal of segregation. They still wanted the ability to own slaves. They still wanted to be separate from the North. And they felt the railroad system was connecting everything together, and they didn't want that. So the gang's later train robberies were a little bit lighter. They held up passengers only twice. choosing in all other incidents only to take the contents of the train, and expressly the safe in the baggage car. John Newman Edwards made sure to highlight these techniques when creating an image of James as a kind of a Robin Hood, despite public sentiment that towards the gang's crime, that there's no evidence James ever shared the robbery money outside their personal circle. He was trying to control the narrative and say, well, they didn't rob passengers, so he's sort of a Robin Hood. Yeah, well, the other oddity, James married his cousin, which apparently was normal back then. He married his cousin Z, and
she's hot.
I'm sure she's a very handsome woman.
That's probably the only woman around,
very handsome woman. They had two children that survived to adulthood, and they had two kids who died as infants.
Okay.
So this would be the Pinkertons.
The Pinkertons.
Yeah. They they were a Chicago-based agency that worked. They were like a
security
modern-day FBI. They worked against.
Well, they were like security guys that you brought in as the hammers, because I think Carnegie, and you could look this up. Carnegie brought in the Pinkertons when he was having the problem where labor obviously rebelled against him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious if I'm right. And but the Pinkertons were like an agency, yeah. And the Pinkertons, Pinkertons National Detective Agency during the late 19th century. They came in as private security. They were founded in 1850, hired to infiltrate unions, intimidate workers, and provide armed guards during strikes.
Exactly.
They had a reputation as a quasi-private army. So what did the banks probably hired them, right?
Alan Pinkerton, the agency's founder and leader, took on this case based on a personal vendetta. He began to work with former unionists who lived near the James family farm, and he staged a raid on their homeland. The detectives threw an incendiary device into the house. It exploded, killing James's half-brother Archie, named for Archie Clement, and blowing off Zerelda Samuel's arms. So now his wife's got no arms, or no, his mother's got no arms. After Pinkerton denied the raid's intent was arson, but several biographers found a letter by Pinkerton in the Library of Congress where Pinkerton declared his intention was to burn the house down. And this is where Jesse James became a folk hero and started to gain support from some people. Many residents were outraged about the raid on the family home. The Missouri state legislature narrowly defeated a bill that praised James and his younger brothers and offered them amnesty, allowing them to vote, hold office again, because again, any former Confederate was still limited for what they could do. And they voted to limit the size of the reward the governor could offer for fugitives. And this extended a measure of protection over the James Younger gang by minimizing the incentive for capturing them. And you also knew the risk of trying to capture them was very high. So the downfall of the gang started in 1876, opening day of hunting season. They tried a raid on the First National Bank in Minnesota. The robbery went wrong, and after it, only Frank and Jesse James remained free. Cole and Bob Younger later said they selected the bank because they believed it was associated with the Republican politician Adelbert Ames, the governor of Mississippi during the Reconstruction, and Union General Benjamin Butler. Ames's father-in-law and Union commander occupied New Orleans. Ames was a stockholder in the bank. Butler had no direct connection to it. So they tried to rob this bank at 2 p.m. They divided up into two groups. 3 men entered the bank. 2 guarded the door outside. 3 remained near a bridge across an adjacent square. The robbers inside the bank were thwarted when acting cashier Joseph Lee Haywood refused to open the safe, falsely claiming that it was secured by a time lock, even as they held a Bowie knife to his throat and cracked his skull with a pistol butt. And assistant cashier Alonzo Enos Bunker was wounded in the shoulder as he fled through the bank, the back of the bank door, the back door of the bank. And citizens of Northfield grew suspicious of the men guarding the door and sounded an alarm. The 5 bandits outside who were watching fired into the air to clear the streets, driving townspeople to take cover. And then back then, everyone had guns, so they fired back at them. And they shot 2 of the gang members dead, wounded the rest, and then, the rest of the outlaws, and it was really Jesse and Frank, they fled. As they left, one shot the unarmed cashier, Haywood, in the head. Historians have speculated about the identity of the shooter, but never realized they reached a consensus. The gang barely escaped Northfield, leaving 2 dead companions behind. They killed Haywood, the cashier, Nicholas Gustafson, a Swedish immigrant, and then there was a substantial manhunt that ensued. And it's believed that the gang burned 14 Rice County mills shortly after the robbery. And then the James brothers eventually split from each other. They escaped Missouri. The militia soon discovered the Youngers and one of the other bandits, Charlie Pitts. And Pitts died in the gunfight, and the Youngers were taken as prisoners. And except for Frank and Jesse, the Younger James gang was destroyed. And later in 1876, Jesse and Frank went to Nashville, where they went by the names of Thomas Howard and B.J. Woodson, respectively. Frank tried to settle down. Jesse remained consistently restless. He recruited a new gang in 1879 and returned to crime. He went back to holding up trains. He held up a train in Glendale, Missouri. The robbery was the first in a spree of crimes, including the holdup of the federal paymaster of a canal project in Killeen, Alabama, and 2 more robberies. However, the problem was this new gang was not made up of these battle-hardened guerrillas who had fought in the Civil War. They eventually turned against each other or were captured, And James eventually became super paranoid and suspicious of the other members. He scared away one man, and some believe that he killed another gang member. And in 1879, the James gang robbed two stores in Mississippi at the Washington and Adams County and Fayette and Jefferson County. They got $2,000 in cash from the second robbery, and they took shelter in abandoned cabins throughout. By 1881, now, because news spread slowly back then, traveled very, very slow, they didn't know. Tennessee authorities were growing suspicious. The brothers returned to Missouri, where they felt safer. James moved his family to St. Joseph, Missouri in November of 1881, not far away where he'd been born and raised. Frank went to Virginia, and he settled, and he intended to give up crime. And because, again, the James gang had been reduced to the two of them. So with the gang obviously down to just them, James trusted only the Ford brothers, Charlie and Robert, although Charlie had been out on raids with James. Bob Ford was an eager new recruit. For protection, James asked the Ford brothers to move in with him and his family. And James had often stayed with their sister, Martha Bolton. He was accordingly smitten with her, so he wanted his sister, I guess, and his cousin. Bob Ford conducted secret negotiations with the new Missouri governor, Thomas T. Crittenden, planning to bring in the famous outlaw. Crittenden had made the capture of the James brothers his top priority. In his inaugural address, he declared that no political motives could be allowed to keep them from justice. Barred from law from offering a large reward, he had turned to the Railroad Express corporations to put up a $5,000 bounty for the delivery of each of them, and another $5,000 for the conviction of them. And then basically what happened was members of this new gang, James found out a member was arrested and confessed to participating in one of their heists. He was suspicious that the Fords, who hired guns as security, had not told him about it. Robert Ford later said he believed that James had realized that they were there to betray him. Instead of confronting them, James walked across the living room, laid his revolvers on a sofa, turned around, noticed the dusty picture above the mantle, and stood on a chair to clean it. Robert Ford drew his weapon and shot the unarmed Jesse James in the back of his head. And James' two previous bullet wounds, the one in the chest, and he had a partially missing middle finger, served to positively identify the body. And the death of Jesse James became a national sensation. The Fords made no attempt to hide their role. Robert Ford, who was like working as a government informant, wired the governor to claim his reward. Crowds pressed into the little house of in St. Joseph to see the dead bandit. The Ford brothers surrendered to authorities, and they were dismayed to be charged with first-degree murder. In the course of a single day, The Ford brothers were indicted. They pled guilty and were sentenced to death by hanging. And then they were granted a full pardon by Governor Crittenden. The governor's quick pardon suggested he knew the brothers intended to kill James rather than capture him. The implication that the chief executive of Missouri conspired to kill a private citizen startled the public and added to James's notoriety. So Ford didn't get all the reward, and the law enforcement officers were pissed off that they let him go. And they were also pissed off that they were given the majority of the bounty. And then the Ford brothers started a touring stage show where they reenacted the shooting. Public opinion was divided between Ford and against Ford for murdering Jesse. And those of the opinion that if it had been time for the outlaw to be stopped. He was suffering from tuberculosis and he was addicted to morphine, which I didn't know. Charlie Ford, the other brother, was so disgruntled he committed suicide in May of 1884. Bob Ford, the other Ford brother, he did the tent saloon and did the recreations, relocated to Colorado. And Edward O'Kelly, another one who was there, went to Creede, Colorado, where Bob Ford was, with a loaded double-barrel shotgun. He entered Ford's saloon and said, "Hello, Bob," before shooting Ford in the throat, killing him instantly. O'Kelly was sentenced to life in prison, but his sentence was commuted because of a 7,000 signature petition in favor of release, as well as another medical condition that he had. The governor of Colorado pardoned him. So James's grave is on the family property, but was later moved to a cemetery in Kearney, which is where that county is now basically located. The original footstone is still there, although the family has replaced the headstone. James's mother, Zerelda Samuel, wrote the following epitaph for him: "In loving memory of my beloved son, murdered by a traitor and coward whose name is not worthy to appear here." And then sadly, his mother died alone and in poverty. And there were also rumors, like we talked about John Wilkes Booth surviving. There were rumors that James survived, and it proliferated around newspapers as soon as his death was announced. Some had said Robert Ford killed someone other than James in an elaborate plot to allow him to escape justice. And those tales have received little credence then or since. None of James' biographers accept them as plausible. The body buried in Kearney, marked Jesse James, was exhumed in 1995 and subjected to mitochondrial DNA typing. The report confirmed that the remains were consistent with one of James's relatives in the female line. So the theme of his survival was featured in a documentary on the History Channel, but there's not much to it. So, I mean, his legacy he turned to crime really after the Reconstruction era helped cement his place in American life and memory, simply put. But he was a remarkably effective bandit. He had a long career that lasted over like 15 years. For a bandit, that's like living to be 100. And it's amazing to me, he died at 34 years old. So this dude was carrying out sophisticated stagecoach robberies, railroad robberies, bank robberies in his 20s, in his teens, and, you know, coordinating gangs, putting together gangs, and all that, you know, really is impressive and shows he probably could have done some good with his life. And he didn't commit like mass murders, other than in Minnesota when they shot. Well, there still wasn't clarity on who shot the cashier, but the Jameses were known, like they didn't commit a ton of murders. They wanted the proceeds, the money. And he remains a controversial subject to this day, who can be interpreted in various ways according to cultural tensions and needs. Some of the neo-Confederate movement regard him as a hero. Other, however, renewed cultural battles all over the place in the Civil War in American history have replaced the long-standing interpretation of James as a Western frontier hero. I just think that he was very tied to the Confederates, and once the war ended, they lost. They hammered down regulations on them. I mean, not being allowed to vote, that limited his earning power. All they knew was farming, and he wanted more. What's the easiest way to get more? Turn to crime. You're on mute.
That's the quickest way to get. Sorry. I said that's the quickest way to get money, not necessarily the best way. But back then it was so different. You know, there wasn't always.
Well, there was no
Avenue.
technology. I mean, the news traveled so slow. I never knew that his crime spree really was nationwide. I mean, you're talking about someone, Minnesota, Iowa, and then Kansas, and then he's in Alabama. Like, he was everywhere. And then he still obviously returned home to Missouri during tough times. I mean, he fought in the Civil War. He just, for someone that young, like if you look at when the gang life actually started. So he was born in 1847. The years he was active in robberies started in 1866. So he's literally in his teens,
Right,
when he is taking part of robberies and putting together gangs and leading these gangs. And I mean, he was the first outlaw. He was the first real outlaw, and he was revered in many cases. People cheered him on. They're like, yeah, you know, screw the government. And I just find it amazing that someone very, very uneducated, very, you know, young, was able to have this kind of success over a decade plus. Because it, you know, it says It said it was from 1866 to 1882. So, I mean, close to 20 years.
It's incredible. And so Jesse James, you know, uh, it's amazing how someone becomes such an outlaw, but is also revered, and how the story
Mhm.
goes. I think that's part of the divide at that time, Reconstruction era of America, where they came down very, very hard on the South
Yeah.
and limited their opportunities, and created a situation where
They had no choice.
well, they had no industry to begin with at the time. It was all farming.
Mhm.
Um, and so you have a situation like that, and it's interesting because um, there's the rebellious nature of Jesse James and his crew, and the fact that they feel like um, this was their only way was really had a lot to do with the fact that first of all, there was opportunity back then to do it. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, if you rob the bank now, there's no money even in the bank, so
Right.
you would be wasting your time. They're not keeping cash in there, but it's one of those things where back then,
That's all
literally,
they had.
they had the vault. That was the vault. They tried to blow the vault, right? So, but that whole thing where there was an opportunity, but there was an opportunity for a lot of people in America at that time, outside of probably the big cities, and
Well,
outside of that,
if you're farmers and you're taking away slaves,
right?
they couldn't they couldn't operate the farms on their own.
Right.
The slaves were needed to cultivate the crops or whatever. And once slavery was abolished, they were unable, they weren't going to pay people to work.
Think about how times have changed so much. Now
Yeah.
farms are basically run by machines
Hmm.
completely, and you have the farmer that's handling everything, but like so much less people are required to operate a farm now. Uh,
Yeah, it's not like
it's
a family business as much anymore.
well,
And
yeah. I mean, it could be, but that you won't need any workers outside the family.
it
So
could, yeah, but like there's so many people who grew up on the farm life and they don't want to take over the farm from their father
right,
eventually.
right, 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 right,
They
right,
want to
right.
do something else.
Good
And
point.
you're right. And now it's more centered around machinery and technology to where you don't need the actual manpower that you used to. But that's how they grew up, with tobacco, and the father farmed hemp, and that was their source of income. Slavery is taken away. They had 7 slaves, the James family. They owned 7 slaves to keep that farm going, even when it was just tobacco.
Right.
So they couldn't keep it going. And it seems like he was at least very good to his mother. He always tried to come back and see his mother, tried to give his mother money. And his brother was doing this all with one arm. He lost his arm in
That's
the
right.
Civil War.
Yeah.
And he's a bigger badass in my opinion.
Well, the thing that stinks about what they did, ultimately was a lot of civilians got caught in the crossfire. Um, and when you read about it, like he killed a lot of people that, uh, they killed a bystander in the famous robberies, the Liberty, Missouri robbery, often considered the first daylight peacetime bank robbery in U.S. history. The gang killed a bystander, making clear their
Yeah.
operation would be violent. Then in Russellville, Kentucky, another bank robbery, heavy gunfire, people killed. train robbery in 1873. Going forward, they did Chicago, Rock Island, Pacific Train,
All over.
And Pacific Train, and near Adair, Iowa. Train robberies became their signature crime. And then the Northfield raid, attempted robbery of the First National Bank. Locals fought back, killing 2 gang members,
That was the one, yeah.
forcing survivors to flee. Disaster effectively, and that was what you talked about earlier. Kind of ended their group,
The
but
younger James gang, yes.
but lots of people, guards, townspeople, civilians, they were all caught in the kind of crossfire, and they're kind of guerrilla,
Collateral damage, yep.
mini guerrilla warfare tactics. Are really,
And
really,
he made a ton of money from, I mean, just 1 or 2 of these.
Oh yeah, for back then.
That he, coming off with 80 grand, and I know you're splitting it up between people, but I mean, he got away with so many successful ones.
Right.
He could have stopped. And Frank James even admitted, when he moved to Virginia, he wanted to stop. He had planned to stop. That's the one thing I want to double check. I'd like to see what happened to Frank. Okay, because it said Frank
Probably old died.
Oh, so Frank lived a lot longer. Frank lived to 1915.
Wow.
Yeah. So Frank he lived to be 72. So he actually may have stopped when he said he was going to. Yeah, he retired. They said that he retired from being an outlaw.
Amazing.
And so he ended up going to Virginia, and he was wanted in several states, but back then, they didn't have the U.S. Marshals or whatever to go find him. He lived under an assumed name. And how about this? In 1882, Frank James surrendered in Jefferson City, and he was held in jail for 3 weeks. He was waiting trial for a year, and then he was acquitted at trial. And then he went to live with his mother. He never was in a penitentiary and never was convicted of any charges against him. That's amazing. And then it says in the last 30 years of his life, James worked a variety of jobs. He sold shoes. He was a burlesque theater ticket taker. Come get your ticket punched by the legendary Frank James. So they used him like that. He was an AT&T telegraph operator, and he took up on the lecture circuit. Wow. And he became a betting commissioner at a fairgrounds racetrack in Missouri.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just amazing that he was able to get out. His brother dies at 34. It apparently shook him up, learned his lesson, and he realized he didn't want to live that life anymore. And he changed. He got married, and he had a child. And then in his final years, he returned still to the James farm, and he died there at age 72 in 1915, leaving behind his wife and son. So that to me is even more amazing, that the dude with one arm survived through all this, changed his life, was never convicted of anything, never served time in jail, and went back to working whatever he could to provide for his family.
Amazing.
It is an amazing story. It is a really, really amazing
A lot of
story.
movies made about it too. So
Yeah, and you know what? I've never seen one. I definitely want to see one. Sam Shepard and the Assassination of Jesse James. Bill Paxton and Frank and Jesse. Leonard Nimoy made one. Wow. I gotta definitely watch one.
Leonard Nimoy, huh?
Yeah.
Leonard.
So this was great. This was great. Billy the Kid was the other one I wanted to look at.
Oh yeah, we should do Billy the Kid. Yeah. Definitely should do Billy the Kid.
Man, it's just amazing to me just how young they were.
Billy the Kid was young too.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys don't care.
Well, I know that the lifespan back then too was young.
It is amazing back then how much they got done for such a short time frame. Like they didn't live long, and they got a lot done, like shockingly, in a short time period. You know what I'm saying? Like they just career wise, you're like, this guy was 30 years old. He already had done all this craziness.
They didn't sit around wallowing, feeling sorry for themselves.
No, they did not. I'll show you what I have here. Then we'll wrap it up.
But the Civil War, my God, I didn't know that I didn't know that they came down that hard on the Confederates. Oh wow. They show his body in the casket.
Young man.
It's amazing that the Ford brothers turned on him. And then one of his other gang members went to find Ford and killed him.
Unbelievable.
The Missouri governor was complicit. Like he inspired to have a private citizen murdered.
Okay.
I think that's amazing. Like Bob Ford was feeding information to the Missouri governor, and the Missouri governor then took it and ran with it. And said, kill. Go ahead. You can kill him.
Motherfucker. But cool, man. Well, till next time.
Yeah, great one here.
Great one. These are interesting, I think. I mean, we should do like John Wayne Gacy or one of those guys. But these are all things that lead into these people who become like ideas.
Yeah, the historical ones are very, very interesting.
Right, because they're like kind of the first ones to do. There's some good historical serial killer ones too. H.H. Holmes, you see that one? Look it up.
I don't know historical here. I'd like to. The only one I heard of was Jack the Ripper, but
I think that was H.H. Holmes. Jack the
Ripper.
Oh,
okay.
Let me see. Let me see. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. Jack the Ripper. Oh no, he was a different. You're right. Yeah, Jack the Ripper would be a great one to do.
Yeah, I don't know anything about him either, so
no, I really don't know that much.
We'll definitely do that, but
yeah, it's interesting what Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper's fucked up.
Oh yeah, Jack the Ripper, and then the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy, Ed Gein. I'd love to do him.
Yeah, that'd be good.
But yeah, this was great, and I love.
Jack the Ripper. Let me
I
see.
love,
Let me see if H.H. Holmes is good. Jack
I
the
love
Ripper's.
the westerns.
Oh yeah, I mean, H.H. Holmes, executed by hanging. First American con artist and serial killer. He only did it for 3 years.
What was the time frame?
1891 to 1894, he committed the crimes.
Oh wow! Oh,
Engaged in insurance fraud, forgery, swindling, three or four bigamous marriages, horse theft, murder, known as the Beast of Chicago, the Devil in the White City, or the Torture Doctor.
That's
He
just
was
incredible.
originally a doctor.
Absolutely incredible.
Very well educated too.
Um,
Firm killings 9, suspected 27 plus.
wow.
Back then, they definitely don't have the ability to. He lived in a castle.
Yeah, they'd have to go back and do DNA testing to.
I mean, this guy was fucking cuckoo.
Well, most are.
That's true.
Most of the serial killers are a little cuckoo.
Amazing. Amazing that he was married multiple. I don't know how they pull off marriages. They must be such narcissistic.
Well, they're good at like Dexter. They wear the mask.
They wear the mask. Yeah.
They take it off when they need to, when they have the urges.
Otherwise, they're wearing the mask.
Yeah. They have to wear the mask to be free. Otherwise, they wouldn't be free. They'd kill all the time. So
Crazy.
All right, for another banner, Bloodlines and Betrayal. Detective Coach Schumann. I'm your host, the best podcast host in the universe, Steve Cully. Remember, when life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade. Take 2 oranges and throw them back.